Good morning and welcome to Mosaic. I'm Rabbi Eric Weiss and honored to be your host. Across our countries, faith communities are changing and they're making an intense effort to get to know themselves. What we'd like to do is invite you into a conversation this morning about a Jewish population study that has just been concluded here in the San Francisco Bay Area. We'd like to introduce you to Julie Golde, who is the Director of Community Impact at the San Francisco-based Jewish Community Federation and Endowment Foundation, and also to Rabbi Andrew Kastner, who is also a Director of Community Impact at the Jewish Community Federation and Foundation of the East Bay. Welcome, Rabbi Kastner and Julie.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
So let's just jump in and ask you, what is the Jewish population study?
Great. Well, this is a study about the demographics and so much more of the Bay Area Jewish community. There are many things that are exciting about this study, but I think the most exciting is this the first population study that has ever been done that includes the entire Bay Area. That's 10 counties. And it looks not just at demographics, but more sort of like socio-demographics about the population.
So generally we're talking about the Far East Bay, sort of what we think of as the South Bay, including Silicon Valley.
Yes.
And then up north throughout Sonoma County, Napa County.
Exactly, and even Solano County, and of course San Francisco. Wonderful.
And so what are some of the things that we've learned?
Oh gosh, so much. I'll just say like a few key takeaways, and then there's so much more to say about each one. I think one of the most important takeaways from my perspective is that we have a highly engaged small core of Jewish people who are engaged in Jewish community life and community, and they are highly engaged and quite vibrant. And the vast population in the Bay Area of Jewish people are not engaged actively in Jewish life and community.
Interesting. So just rewinding a little bit, I think that whenever communities look at themselves, one of the core questions is that if somebody feels that they're a part of the community, they want to know who was included. So how was the study actually done?
Oh, great. Well, the study was done in a very methodologically sound way. So we didn't work off of who's coming to events and who do all the community agencies and synagogues have on their list. We actually did a very controlled, random sample. We worked with a polling company called YouGov, which is like Gallup poll, that helped us construct a sound sample. So there were over 3,000 respondents to the survey, and then it's weighted very carefully through this statistical analysis so that you can deduce and derive generalized conclusions about such a large area and population.
Fascinating. So, and the last time our San Francisco, well, the Bay Area Jewish community did a study on itself was when?
So in 2004, the San Francisco Federation did a study that was just a subset of the entire Bay Area. And then in 2011, the East Bay Federation did a study that was just on the East Bay Area. So it's been quite a few years, and this is precedent-setting because it's the entire area.
So we've really taken a holistic approach to the entire Bay Area Jewish community.
Yes.
And so when we think about who Jews are, I know not everybody would necessarily know this, but some of the questions that we ask ourselves is, who is a Jew and what's Jewish status? And so what were some of the ways in which that was understood?
Well, we use the broadest definition of who is Jewish. Basically, if you consider yourself Jewish or partially Jewish in any way, by religion or anything, you're in. In other words, you're, as part of the screening, that's Jewish. So not a narrow definition of Jewish at all. In fact, the broadest definition possible. And we also consider part of the Bay Area Jewish population people who live with Jews, people who are partnered or married with Jews. So we have 350,000 Jewish people in the entire Bay Area, based on our study findings, and 473,000 total people in Jewish households.
Fascinating. So we're going to take a quick break in just a moment, but before we go, how does the Bay Area rank in terms of its actual number of Jewish community in the country?
We are the fourth largest.
We're the fourth largest, so we are after...
I knew you were going to ask me that. Okay,
Yeah.
I think it goes New York,
Los Angeles.
Los Angeles, I think, and Southeast Florida, which was sort of a, like, what? Oh, sorry, Florida. Yeah, Los Angeles, and then the Bay Area.
Wonderful.
So pretty significant.
We're going to take a quick break and come back to this conversation in just a moment.
Great.
Welcome back to Mosaic. I'm Rabbi Eric Weiss, and honored to be your host this morning. We're in the middle of a wonderful conversation about a Jewish population study that the Jewish community has conducted in the Bay Area. I'd like to reintroduce you to Julie Golde and to Rabbi Andrew Kastner, both directors of community impact at two different federations. Julie Golde is at the San Francisco-based Jewish Community Federation and Endowment Foundation, and Rabbi Kastner is at the Jewish Community Federation and Foundation of the East Bay. Welcome back, Julie and Rabbi Kastner.
Thank you.
So we were talking about some of the basics around the Jewish population study, and I'm wondering, what are some of the things that we can say about this particular Jewish community at this point in time?
There's a lot to say about the Jewish community. We use the portrait really to assess the state of our community, the fitness, the well-being, and to do some meaning making. What we can say about our community is that it's extraordinarily diverse. It is stable, and we're seeing a lot of movement within the Bay Area. We have a lot of young Jews who are looking to find ways to connect to community in diverse ways.
And do we know sort of how the population age pie kind of cuts in terms of age and race and immigration status and that sort of a thing?
Yeah, we know a lot. In terms of the pie, the largest percentage of our population are young adults. And in fact, we have the largest young adult population of any Jewish community in the United States, even in North America. That's percentage of population, not numbers of people. And the second bubble of our population are boomers, baby boomers.
So young adult is probably 18 through 34, and then baby boomers are sort of late 50s forward.
Exactly, forward to somewhere in the 60s or 70, yeah.
Fantastic. So what are some of the other sort of big themes that are sort of emerging from the study itself?
Well, Andy mentioned the diversity. I dare say we have the most diverse Jewish population, perhaps in the whole world outside of Israel. And you see that increasing beautiful diversity growing the younger you look at the population. So it's about a quarter of households have racial and ethnic diversity in them, and then as you get younger, 18 to 34, it's about 38%. And we can assume that that trend would increase.
I know that there's so much that's sort of being looked at and analyzed in terms of what perhaps one might think of as the facts of a study, but I'm wondering what is sort of highlighted about, therefore, how people express their Jewishness. We have in the Bay Area anyway one of the most diverse communities in the entire world, and if we are also probably, it seems like, the most diverse Jewish community in the diaspora, then what does it say about how a Jew of color, an LGBT Jew, a Jewish person who is a single parent, a Jewish person who comes here as a young person who comes here on their own, and they might come from a different part of the country, but they're sort of an immigrant to the Bay Area. What is all of that, do you think, saying about how we might want to be Jewish and express our Jewishness?
There's a unique cultural characteristic of the Bay Area, and certainly the Jewish the Jewish community in the Bay Area, we're really defined by flexibility. We have this adventurous spirit, and I would say kind of like a cultural porousness. We don't necessarily, in general, experience Jewish life in a very particular way, but there's an openness to integrating, and I would say remixing from other cultures and other universal values. That's really the character and the way in which Jewish life is celebrated and expressed here in the Bay Area.
So it seems interesting because in a very reductionist way, faith communities generally think of the locus of their faith community life in their place of worship, like a church or a temple or a synagogue or an ashram or a mosque. And part of what I hear you saying is that in the porousness of all of this, it might be that the locus of our Jewishness actually is not singular. It's not monolithic. It's not even in one thematic structure.
That's very well put.
Yeah. Yeah, we're really in this moment of experiencing this creative renaissance of Jewish life here in the Bay Area. We have the one of the largest concentrations of, I would say, kind of the Jewish innovation or startup sector, which are looking at new pathways to express Jewish life, Jewish wisdom through the arts, through earth-based traditions, in and outside of synagogues and JCCs.
Interesting. We're going to take a quick break and come back and continue this wonderful conversation about the Jewish community study here in the Bay Area. Please join us in just a moment back here on Mosaic. Good morning. Welcome back to Mosaic. I'm Rabbi Eric Weiss, and honored to be your host this morning in the middle of a wonderful conversation about the Jewish population study that was just done here in the Bay Area. Welcome back to Julie Golde and Rabbi Andrew Kastner, who are both directors of community impact at their respective federation. Julie at the Jewish Community Federation and Endowment Foundation in San Francisco, and in the East Bay, Rabbi Andrew Kastner. Welcome back.
Thanks.
So it seems like the population study is really in the midst of a very sort of robust analysis. It's not a singular concluded portrait. I think portrait's a wonderful word because it's a little bit more dynamic than study or analysis. But it seems like it's a little bit ongoing analysis, and I wonder if you can talk a little bit about how that's going.
Sure. Yeah. And I also love the word portrait, because if you look at a portrait in a museum, there's so much depth to it as opposed to a photograph, which can be, which is flat. So indeed, that's true. There is ongoing analysis that we rolled the portrait out in mid-February, and that's really the beginning of a process. The whole community is participating in the conversation through ongoing meetings, and there's a final report that's due at the end of the summer. And another sort of exciting innovation with the portrait, which is a digital tool, so that people can kind of play around with the data and look at it according to lenses that they're interested in. That's also expected at the end of the summer. And if you keep checking back on the website, you'll see additional reports, the scorecard link, and people are writing a lot, opinion pieces. And you can find that organized on the website as well under the community study banner.
Fascinating. And so is there a place in the portal for somebody who's just out there in the community to give input about what they see?
Absolutely. We want, when we do the digital portrait tool, a place for conversation where people can say, here's where I see myself, or here's where I don't see myself.
Fascinating. So in that context so far, what are some of the challenges, what are some of the ways in which we see ourselves that are perhaps different than what we thought or the way we thought we saw each other? That's sort of, I think, part and parcel of when we find out what's new about us.
Right. Well, I think Andy really described what's so incredible, exciting, and dynamic about the Bay Area Jewish community. And sort of pivoting from that, with all of that as a foundation, going back to the original observation that so many people are unengaged in Jewish life and community. With all of that vibrancy, it's a core. So that is a significant takeaway, and thinking about, well, why is that? And what can we do to draw more people to experience Jewish life, since it provides so much meaning and grounding in the world today. So that is really a lot of what we're looking at in some of these community conversations, and will continue to. How can this lead to new policy and direction for Jewish communal leadership, so that the community is more representative of the full population?
And so what are some of the, if we can sort of label pockets
Sure.
of folks who, if you think of sort of concentric circles and there's a core, then what's the circle after that, and the circle after that, and the circle after that? So can we name some of those outer circles?
Yes. So we found economic stress and strain in the Bay Area population, and even pockets of poverty. But more than the poverty, which was about 2%, about 22 or 20% of people said they are really struggling. They're just barely managing to make ends meet. So this is a very significant learning. And we find that perhaps in previous studies or generations, older people were the ones that were less financially secure in previous generations. Not true today. And this is reflected in the general population as well, and affirmed by our study. It's younger people, young adults and young families, who are struggling to make ends meet in very profound ways. They're saddled with things that older generations just aren't, like the high cost of housing, an immense student debt, and the lack of stability in the job market today. So this is affecting our younger people in profound ways that we don't expect to just resolve when they get more, like when I was growing up, yes, there was a struggle, but there was this understanding that you would sort of hit a certain age, and that was this. It doesn't feel that way anymore.
And does that economic, you use the term economic uncertainty, economic stress, does that express itself what seems to be like across the board of one's career? So it's from the young adult, the recent college graduate, all the way through to somebody who is even nearing retirement?
No, much more so in the younger and the next, so 18 to 34, and then like 35 to 49, much more profoundly, this sort of lack of stability economically, which I don't mean to imply there are not seniors who are struggling, but the most economic need we're seeing in the younger sets of the demographics.
And is our 2%, when you use the word sort of poverty group, is that an older cohort?
That we need to unpack a little bit more, which is leading to the further analysis. And Andy and I have spoken about really diving more deeply into the 2%, and then, of course, the 20% of the, yes, we're making it, but just barely.
Wow, so interesting. We need to take a quick break, but we're going to come back in just a moment here on Mosaic. Sorry to cut you off, but like... Good morning and welcome back to Mosaic. I'm Rabbi Eric Weiss, and honored to be your host. We're in the middle of a wonderful conversation about the Jewish demographic portrait that was done here in the Bay Area. Welcome back, Rabbi Andrew Kastner and Julie Golde. Rabbi Kastner, we were talking about some of the economic stressors of the portrait study, and I wonder if you can talk a little bit more about what those stressors are at this point that we know of.
Yeah, one of the things that I wanted to highlight is that these pockets of poverty and economic stress, which really impact us psychologically, emotionally, presented itself as a headline and was really a surprise to a lot of people, because when we look out at the community, it's very easy to see affluence and economic boom. But one of the great gifts that the portrait offers us is really the ability to see what is hard to see. And the responsibility that we have as a community is really to look at kind of the safety net within our community and how it can be buttressed and more active. And the other piece is that we know that there is a stigma around poverty and economic strain. And part of our role as a community is to be conscious and to address this strain so that we can be more supportive of those who are in need.
You know, it brings to my mind just the complexity of what that means, because when you think of the Jewish community at large as an immigrant community, and by and large, the Jewish community across the country considers itself to be a successful immigrant story. And part of that story has to do with economic success, like what Julie was saying earlier, that there's a kind of assumption that you go to college, you get a career, and you're kind of fine, and education elevates you, and that there's a lot of things that line up after that. And I think part of what we're seeing with economic stress is that you might do those things, and yet it may not be the same level of success, and expectations are changing, and also that a lot of us in the community are in the trades or become disabled in some way, or don't earn an income based on a professional career. And I'm wondering what those things are going to show us about ourselves in terms of what then gives us what you said earlier about the porousness of our interaction with one another.
Yeah, it's too soon to tell because we're early in the meaning making. But what strikes me is that, we've seen the work of federations and philanthropy within the Jewish community change. But what this data point highlights for us is that it really kind of harkens back to the origin of federations here in the Bay Area and in the country, which is to be accessible and supportive of those who are vulnerable in our community, and to really be a force for good in reaching out and to helping them stabilize. And so the shape that will take is really part of our work moving forward.
And do we know at this point in the portrait where some of these pockets are? Is it across the entire Bay Area? Is it in a particular place, a particular county?
Well, the part where people are struggling to make ends meet, we see that throughout. In other words, we don't look at one county or geographic area and say, oh, here it is. It's pretty evenly distributed. In terms of the actual poverty, where is that? We need to do a deeper analysis on that, and I think we will find more of a locus there. And so that's part of the final report and more detail. And also just to say, it's really true what Andy said and what you pointed out. If the Jewish community, the organized communal life, is more occupied by middle class, upper middle class, and affluent people as it is, and that is not your story and narrative, you're not going to opt in, not because you're, you just wouldn't really even think this is something for you that's relevant for you. So it's very important as we go forward to think about how to make this community one that really is reflective of the population, which right now I don't think it is. So we have work to do.
It seems so important when we talk about what then the consequence is to issues around philanthropy and issues around points of access and what you join and what you don't join and where you can be a part of the community at large.
Yeah.
Rabbi Kastner and Julie, this is such a wonderful conversation. We're going to just put a comma in the conversation and encourage you to go to the website and continue to participate. For more information on the Jewish Community Federation Endowment Fund here in San Francisco, go to www.jewishfederation.org, and for the East Bay, jfed.org. Thank you for being with us on Mosaic.